In Cedar Grove, a small town where kindness still trumps convenience, Jack Morrison had exactly two treasures: his 8-year-old daughter Emma and the bicycle that carried him between his 3 jobs. When he spotted a well-dressed woman stranded by the roadside one autumn evening, he offered her his only means of transportation without hesitation. What Jack couldn't know was that Alexandra Kent, worth billions, had escaped to Cedar Grove, searching for something her family's empire had never managed to acquire: authenticity. In his simple act of kindness, she found it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm buzzed at 4:30 a.m., and Jack Morrison's hand found it before the sound could wake Emma. In the pre-dawn darkness of their small 2-bedroom apartment, he moved with the practiced precision of a man who had long ago memorized which floorboards creaked. The coffee maker's gentle gurgle filled the kitchen as he cradled Emma's latest creation, a misshapen ceramic mug with "World's Best Dad" painted in wobbly letters, a treasure from last month's art class. 5 years of single parenthood had taught Jack the choreography of efficient mornings. Lunch packed, peanut butter and banana sandwich, apple slices, and if the grocery budget allowed, a small treat. Clothes laid out. Emma's favorite purple sweater needed mending, but that would have to wait until Sunday. And backpack checked, homework complete, permission slip signed. Each task a testament to love, measured in minutes and routine. In the bathroom mirror, Jack straightened his collar, janitor's uniform for the morning shift at Cedar Grove Elementary, where Emma would start her school day. By lunch, he'd switch to his hardware store apron, and evenings meant delivering pizzas until 9. The mirror reflected a man younger than his 34 years would suggest, though fragments of grey had begun to appear at his temples. His mother used to say worry aged a person faster than time, but Jack preferred to think of each silver strand as earned wisdom. Emma's door creaked open at 6:15, right on schedule. "Daddy!" she called out, voice still thick with sleep. Like every morning, Jack's heart squeezed at how much she sounded like Sarah in those first moments of waking. "In the kitchen, sunshine," he answered, already pouring milk over her cereal. Emma padded in, brown curls wild from sleep, clutching Mr. Whiskers, the one-eyed stuffed cat that had been her constant companion since Sarah's passing. "You're wearing your nice shirt," she observed, climbing onto her chair. At 8, Emma noticed everything, cataloguing the world with the meticulous attention of a scientist discovering a new species. Jack smiled, touching the collar of the blue button-down he'd found at the thrift store last week. "Parent-teacher conference this afternoon, remember? Mrs. Rodriguez wants to talk about your science project." Emma's face brightened. "Do you think she liked my hypothesis about plant growth with different types of music? Jazz made the beans grow tallest, just like I predicted." "Of course she did. Who wouldn't be impressed by a scientist who plays Miles Davis to her bean sprouts?" Jack ruffled her hair, heart swelling with pride. Emma had inherited her mother's curiosity about the world, always asking questions that made him wish he'd paid more attention in school. The morning routine continued its familiar dance. Teeth brushed, hair tamed, mostly, shoes tied. As Jack locked their apartment door, old Mrs. Chen from next door was already shuffling out to water her hallway plants. "Good morning, Morrisons," she called, beaming at Emma. "I made too many dumplings yesterday. Come by after school." This was their neighborhood's language of love. Casual offerings of food, casual denials of intention. Jack had learned to accept such kindnesses gracefully. Pride couldn't feed a growing child. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. We'd like that." The September air held the first hint of autumn as they walked to where Jack's bicycle waited, secured with 2 locks to the rack outside. Their building. The bike, a 15-year-old Schwinn, had been Sarah's wedding gift to him, back when they were young and full of dreams about reducing their carbon footprint. Now it was his lifeline, carrying him between jobs, to grocery stores, to Emma's school events. "Can I ride on the handlebars today?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer. Not since you turned 8, remember? You're getting too big for that now. Jack secured her backpack in the front basket. Another of Mrs. Chen's found items that had mysteriously appeared one day. But you can walk with me while I roll it. Tell me more about those jazz-loving beans of yours. As they made their way through awakening streets, Emma's voice painted the air with enthusiasm about photosynthesis and musical frequencies. Jack listened, offering questions at just the right moments, storing away each detail of her excitement like precious gems. These morning walks were their special time, when the world belonged only to them and anything seemed possible. At the school gates, Emma hugged him fiercely, another ritual unchanged by time. Love you, Daddy. Don't forget to eat lunch today. Love you too, Sunshine. And I won't forget, I packed an extra sandwich just like you asked. He watched her skip away, purple sweater brightening the morning, and felt the familiar ache of pride and worry that had become his constant companion since becoming a single parent. Mounting his bicycle, Jack began the day's first journey, mentally calculating the hours until he'd see her again. The bike's well-oiled chain hummed beneath him, each revolution carrying him forward into another day of making ends meet, of being enough, of keeping promises to a wife no longer there and a daughter who deserved the world. Alexandra Kent stared at her reflection in the tinted windows of her family's Manhattan office building, barely recognizing the woman who stared back. The Wall Street Journal lay crumpled in her Hermes handbag, its headline still burning in her mind. Kent Industries heiress set to take helm. Ruthless business acumen runs in the family. Ruthless. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. Yesterday's board meeting replayed in her thoughts. Her father's proud smile as she had presented the proposal to acquire and dismantle Stewart Manufacturing, a family-owned business in Vermont. "Excellent strategy, Alexandra," he'd said. "Their workers' pensions are a liability we can eliminate within the first quarter. 250 families would lose their livelihood." She had run the numbers perfectly, projected the profit margins flawlessly. It was exactly what she had been groomed for since childhood, the careful cultivation of an empire built on calculated decisions and strategic acquisitions. The taxi driver glanced at her in his rearview mirror. "Where to, miss?" Alexandra opened, her mouth to give her usual Upper East Side address, but something stopped her. Her fingers found the small brass key in her pocket, the key to her grandmother's old cottage in Cedar Grove, a property her father had been trying to convince her to sell for years. "Grand Central Station," she said instead. The decision crystallized with each passing block. Her phone buzzed incessantly, her assistant, the board members, her father, each message a link in the golden chains that had bound her for 32 years. She powered off the phone and dropped it into her bag. At the station, she purchased a ticket with cash, a first in her adult life. Her credit cards and official ID remained untouched in her wallet. The cottage had a small emergency fund in the safe, enough to last until she figured out her next move. She thought of her grandmother, the only person in the family who had ever questioned the Kent way of life. "There's more to legacy than stock portfolios, Alexandra," she used to say, serving tea in chipped porcelain cups instead of the family's fine china. The train to Cedar Grove felt like a portal to another world. Designer heels clicked against worn carpet as she found her seat, ignoring the curious glances from other passengers. A young mother struggled past with a toddler and groceries. Alexandra surprised herself by standing to help her stow her bags. "Thank you," the woman said, genuine warmth in her smile. "That's so kind of you." Kind. When was the last time someone had used that word to describe her? The Kent family valued many qualities: excellence, ambition, shrewdness, but kindness had never made the list. As Manhattan's skyline receded, Alexandra felt years of carefully constructed persona beginning to crack. She thought of the meeting scheduled for Monday, where she was supposed to finalize the Stewart Manufacturing acquisition. In her bag, beside the crumpled newspaper, lay the folder containing all the devastating details. workforce reduction. Plans, asset liquidation strategies, projected profits from the sale of the manufacturing facility. The countryside rolled past her window, autumn colors painting the world in warm hues, so different from the steel and glass of her usual surroundings. Her grandmother's stories of Cedar Grove began to surface in her memory. Tales of community festivals, of neighbors helping neighbors, of a life measured in moments rather than millions. The sun was setting when the train finally pulled into Cedar Grove's modest station. Alexandra stepped onto the platform, her heels immediately catching in the uneven boards. The station's single employee, an elderly man reading a paperback, barely glanced up. No one here knew her face, despite it gracing the covers of business magazines. No one cared about her net worth or her Harvard MBA or her perfect succession and plan to the Kent Empire. She started walking, her designer luggage rolling awkwardly on the unpaved sidewalk. The cottage was 2 miles away, but she needed the time to think, to breathe, to begin shedding the weight of expectations she'd carried for so long. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A screen door slammed. The evening air carried the scent of someone's dinner cooking. This wasn't a permanent solution. She knew that. Eventually the real world would catch up. But for now, with each step away from the station, Alexandra Kent, heiress and CEO in waiting, began to disappear, leaving behind just Alexandra, a woman in impractical shoes, searching for something she couldn't yet name. The heel snapped exactly halfway between the grocery store and her grandmother's cottage. Alexandra stumbled, catching herself against a fence post as her ankle twisted. Perfect. The sun was setting, her arms ached from carrying bags of basic supplies, and now her favorite Louboutins were casualties of Cedar Grove's uneven sidewalks. 3 days into her self-imposed exile, and the universe seemed determined to remind her of how ill-equipped she was for normal life. She'd spent 20 minutes in the grocery store aisle that morning, staring at different brands of bread, realizing she'd never actually bought her own groceries before. A quick mental calculation told her she was still at least a mile from the cottage. Her phone remained resolutely powered off in her bag, insurance against tracking and temptation. She shifted the grocery bags, grimacing at the growing blisters on her palms. The sound of bicycle wheels spinning and a child's laughter drifted down the street. Alexandra looked up to see a man walking his bike beside a young girl in a purple sweater, their heads close together in animated conversation. "But Daddy, if the plants like jazz so much, maybe we should play them some rock and roll too, just to be scientific about it." "Careful there, sunshine. Mrs. Rodriguez might not appreciate AC/DC blasting in the science lab." They were about to pass her when the girl noticed Alexandra's predicament. "Daddy, look, that lady needs help." Jack Morrison's first impression of Alexandra was one of contradictions. Designer clothes that seemed out of place on Cedar Grove's modest streets, but there was something vulnerable in her expression that caught him off guard. She stood with one shoe off, grocery bags clustered around her feet like uncertain children. "Are you all right?" he asked, already assessing the situation with the efficiency of a parent used to solving problems on the fly. Alexandra felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm fine, really. Just a broken heel and poor planning on my part." Emma darted forward, peering at the damaged shoe with fascination. "That's a really pretty shoe, even broken." "Emma," Jack said gently, "remember what we said about giving people space?" But Alexandra found herself smiling at the child's directness. "Thank you. They were pretty, but maybe not the most practical choice for walking." Jack glanced at the grocery bags, then at the setting sun, then back to Alexandra. Years of juggling work and parenthood had taught him to make quick decisions. "Look, I've got my bike here. It's not fancy, but it'll get you where you need to. Go. Emma and I are headed home anyway, just a couple blocks away." Alexandra blinked, surprised by the offer. "Oh, I couldn't possibly. The basket's perfect for groceries," Emma chimed in, already moving to demonstrate. "Daddy says it's magic because it always has room for one more thing." Before Alexandra could protest further, Jack was helping Emma Transfer the grocery bags to the bicycle's basket. The easy efficiency of their teamwork made something twist in Alexandra's chest. When was the last time someone had helped her without an agenda? I really can't accept. She tried again. Sure. You can, Jack said, his tone warm but leaving no room for argument. Just bring it back when you're done. We're at Cedar View Apartments, number 4B. I'm Jack Morrison, and this is my daughter Emma, future scientist and current expert on jazz-loving plants. Emma beamed at the introduction. The beans grew this tall. She stretched her arms wide, making Alexandra laugh despite herself. Alexandra, she offered, carefully omitting her surname. I'm staying at my grandmother's old cottage on Maple Street. The words felt strange. The first true thing she'd said about herself in days. Jack helped steady the bike as she awkwardly mounted it, her remaining heel making the process less than graceful. The old Kent place? He asked, and Alexandra's heart skipped a beat before she realized he was simply making conversation. Nice spot. The garden used to be beautiful. It still could be, Emma said thoughtfully. Plants just need love and jazz music. The bike was old, but impressively well-maintained, everything about it speaking of care and attention. Alexandra felt the weight of trust in this small act of kindness. A stranger lending his obvious lifeline to another stranger. I'll bring it back first thing tomorrow, she promised, meaning it more than any of the corporate pledges she'd made in boardrooms. No rush, Jack said, taking Emma's hand. We've got a standing breakfast date with Mrs. Chen's dumplings tomorrow morning anyway. As Alexandra pedaled away, she heard Emma's voice carried on the evening air. Daddy, she looked kind of sad. Like, that plant in my room before we figured out it needed more sunlight. The simple observation nearly made Alexandra lose her balance. Trust a child to see right through carefully constructed facades. The rest of the journey passed in a blur of sensations. The cooling evening air on her face, the gentle squeak of the well-oiled chain, the way the bike seemed to know the route better than she did. By the time she reached her grandmother's and cottage, the sky had deepened to purple, and Alexandra had experienced something she hadn't felt in years, the simple pleasure of being helped without being judged. Inside the cottage, she unpacked her groceries with unusual care, each item finding its place in the modest kitchen. The broken heel lay abandoned by the door, no longer seeming like the crisis it had felt like an hour ago. Through the window, she could see the overgrown garden Jack had mentioned. Her grandmother had loved that garden, spending hours tending to plants that bloomed simply because they were loved, not because they increased property value. Tomorrow, she decided, she would return the bike and properly thank the Morrisons for their kindness. Maybe she'd ask Emma about her plant experiments. Maybe she'd even take a look at that garden. For the first time since arriving in Cedar Grove, Alexandra felt something shift inside her, like a tightly wound spring finally allowed to relax, just a fraction, in the growing darkness of her grandmother's cottage. Surrounded by memories of a simpler life, she realized that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of kindness. Even something as simple as lending a bicycle to a stranger. Dawn painted Cedar Grove in shades of possibility. Alexandra stood in her grandmother's kitchen, watching the sunrise through unwashed windows, a chipped mug of coffee warming her hands. The bike waited by the door, ready to be returned. She'd spent half the night thinking about what came next, weighing options with the same analytical precision she'd once applied to corporate acquisitions. The cottage's landline rang, startling her. Only her father had this number. 5 rings, then silence. The answering machine clicked on, her grandmother's voice preserved in time. You've reached Margaret Kent's home. Leave a message if you'd like. Or better yet, come by for tea instead. No. Message followed. Alexandra released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. An hour later, she pushed open the door of the Cedar Grove diner. The bike safely returned to the Morrisons' apartment with a thank you note tucked in its basket. The breakfast rush was in full swing, the air thick with coffee and conversation. Sit anywhere you like, honey, called a waitress, her name tag reading Betty. Coffee. Alexandra slid into a booth, the vinyl seat cracking slightly under her. Wait. Yes, please. The menu before her was laminated, its corners soft with age. Prices that would have barely covered the tip at her usual Manhattan breakfast spots bought full meals here. She found herself studying the other patrons. A retired couple sharing toast, workers in construction gear huddled over massive plates. Of eggs, a young mother entertaining a toddler with a game of peekaboo. First time in town, Betty asked, returning with coffee. No, Alexandra replied, surprising herself with the surge of emotion that followed. I used to visit my grandmother here when I was young. Margaret Kent? Betty's face softened with recognition. Maggie, Lord, she made the best apple pies for the Harvest Festival. Always had time to listen to everyone's troubles, that woman. You staying at her place? For now, Alexandra said carefully. I'm taking some time to figure things out. Aren't we all, honey? Betty winked. Now what'll you have? Our blueberry pancakes were your grandmother's favorite. The pancakes, when they arrived, tasted nothing like the artisanal brunches Alexandra was used to. They were better, unpretentious, generous, served with real maple syrup in a sticky plastic pitcher. Each bite felt like permission to stay. After breakfast, she walked Cedar Grove's main street, seeing it with new eyes. The hardware store where Jack worked caught her attention. She could see him through the window, helping an elderly customer select paint colors. He smiled at something the woman said, and Alexandra found herself smiling too. The local real estate office was wedged between a second-hand bookstore and a pharmacy. Inside, a bell chimed softly as she entered. Welcome to Cedar Grove Realty. A woman called from behind a desk cluttered with papers. I'm Carol. What can I help you with? Alexandra squared her shoulders. I'm looking for a small apartment to rent. Something modest, preferably furnished. Carol's eyes lit up. Well, isn't that something? We just had a unit open up at the Maple Street Apartments. Nothing fancy, mind you, but clean and quiet. Most of our tenants have been there for years. An hour later, Alexandra held keys to a one-bedroom apartment that cost less per month than a single business dinner in Manhattan. The furniture was mismatched, the carpet slightly worn, but the windows looked out over a small park where children played after school. Walking back to her grandmother's cottage to collect her things, Alexandra's phone weighed heavy in her bag, still turned off. The business world she'd left behind would be in an uproar by now, meetings missed, deals hanging in limbo, her father probably furious. But for the first time in years, maybe ever, she felt like she could breathe. In the cottage kitchen, she found an old notepad in a drawer. Her grandmother's handwriting filled the margins with recipe notes and phone numbers of neighbors. Alexandra turned to a fresh page and began to write, Dear Father, I'm safe. But I won't be returning to New York or Kent Industries. Some legacies aren't measured in stock prices. She paused, remembering Emma's earnest face describing her plant. Experiments, Jack's quiet dignity as he'd offered his bike to a stranger, Betty's easy acceptance of her presence in the diner. These people measured worth differently here. The rest of the letter flowed easily. No apologies, no detailed explanations. Just the truth, that she needed time, space, and a chance to discover who she might be outside the Kent Empire. As evening settled over Cedar Grove, Alexandra unpacked her single suitcase in her new apartment. From her window, she could see the lights coming on in surrounding homes, including the Cedar View apartments where the Morrisons lived. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A screen door slammed. The ordinary symphony of a small town settling into night. She'd chosen the simplest dinner from her grandmother's recipe box. Tomato soup and grilled cheese. As she stirred the soup, Alexandra realized she was humming, something she hadn't done since childhood. Outside her window, real life was happening, unpolished and authentic. For the first time in her adult life, she wanted to be part of it. The science fair project table wobbled dangerously, and Alexandra found herself lunging forward to steady it before Emma's carefully arranged display could topple. The school gymnasium hummed with the energy of dozens of young scientists, proudly showing off their experiments. "Careful there," Jack said, appearing beside her with a roll of duct tape. "This table's been threatening to collapse since I started working here. Hold it steady." They worked together to stabilize the leg, Alexandra holding it in place while Jack applied his fix. She'd been in Cedar Grove for 3 weeks now, and somehow found herself volunteering at the elementary school science fair. The familiar scent of floor cleaner reminded her that this was where Jack spent his early mornings, keeping the building clean and safe for children like Emma. "There," Emma declared, adjusting her poster board one final time. "What do you think?" The display was a riot of color, documenting her experiments with music and plant growth. Photographs showed bean sprouts at various stages, each labeled with the type of music they'd been exposed to. Emma had even included pressed leaves and hand-drawn graphs. "It's wonderful," Alexandra said, meaning it. "You've documented everything so carefully." "The scientific method would be proud," Emma beamed, then frowned slightly. "I wish Mom could see it. She loved science too." Jack's hand found his daughter's shoulder, squeezing gently. Alexandra watched the wordless exchange between them, the way they held each other up in moments like these. "She'd be amazed by your research," Jack said softly, "especially that conclusion about Mozart versus Miles Davis." Emma brightened. "Jazz won by 2 whole centimeters. Alexandra, did you know my mom was a biology teacher? She used to say that science is just another way of loving the world by trying to understand it." "That's beautiful," Alexandra said, her throat tight. "And very wise." The gym filled with more families, and Emma threw herself into explaining her project to anyone who stopped by. Alexandra watched as Jack circulated, picking up trash, adjusting chairs, always in motion. During his brief breaks, he'd return to Emma's table, pride radiating from him as he listened to her enthusiastic explanations. Later that evening, after the science fair had wound down and Emma's project had earned an honorable mention, they found themselves at the diner. Betty didn't even need to take their order anymore. Grilled cheese and tomato soup for Alexandra, chocolate chip pancakes for Emma, and a turkey club for Jack. And then Billy's volcano actually worked, Emma recounted, still buzzing with excitement. But some of the lava got on Jessica's plant growth chart, and Alexandra helped her fix it with her fancy pen. "Speaking of fixing things," Jack said, "I noticed you working in your grandmother's garden yesterday. Making any progress?" Alexandra nodded, surprised he'd noticed. "Slowly. Emma's been giving me tips about talking to the plants, though I draw the line at playing them jazz at 7 in the morning. "That's the best time," Emma protested. "They're just waking up." Their laughter drew smiles from other diners. They'd become a familiar sight here, the 3 of them sharing meals and stories. Emma pulled out her sketchbook, something she carried everywhere, and began drawing what looked like a garden full of musical instruments. "For you," she said, sliding the finished drawing across the table to Alexandra. "It's your garden, but with everything it needs to grow happy." Alexandra studied the picture. Flowers blooming from trumpet bells, vegetables growing along piano keys, and 3 stick figures tending to it all. Her heart caught at the implications of that 3rd figure, at how easily Emma had included her in their world. Jack looked over her shoulder at the drawing. "Those are some lucky plants," he said softly, and Alexandra felt the weight of something unspoken in his words. The diner's bell chimed as new customers entered. Through the window, Cedar Grove's main street was settling into evening shop lights, glowing warm against the darkening sky. Emma continued drawing. Jack nursed his coffee, and Alexandra felt herself settling too, not into darkness, but into something that felt surprisingly like belonging. "We should plant something together," Emma announced suddenly. "In your garden, something that likes jazz." "I'd like that," Alexandra said, meeting Jack's eyes over their daughter's head. His smile held the same mix of wonder and caution. She felt this careful thing growing between them, as delicate as Emma's bean sprouts, but just as determined to reach toward the light. The burner phone vibrated against Alexandra's hip as she knelt in her grandmother's garden. pulling weeds beside the newly planted tomatoes. Emma had insisted they name each plant. These were Miles and Ella, in keeping with the jazz theme. Alexandra pulled off her gardening gloves and checked the message. Board meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Your absence is becoming problematic. Father insists on your return. Charles. Her brother's message joined dozens of others on the prepaid phone she'd purchased solely for family emergencies. The other phone, a real one, remained powered off in her apartment, a black mirror holding reflections of her other life. Across the street, Mrs. Peterson was hanging laundry, pausing to wave. Alexandra waved back, dirt still under her fingernails. She'd learned more about real life in 6 weeks in Cedar Grove than in 32 years of boardrooms and charity galas. The garden was coming back to life, much like its caretaker. Yesterday, Jack had stopped by with Emma after school, bringing seedlings from the hardware store's garden center. Employee discount, he'd said with a wink, though Alexandra suspected he'd paid full price. She checked her watch, nearly time for her shift at the library. Another part of her new life that would have seemed incomprehensible mere months ago. Mrs. Rodriguez, Emma's science teacher and the head librarian, had offered her the part-time position after they'd talked books during the science fair. The salary was barely pocket change compared to her former world, but the satisfaction of honest work felt rich in ways she was only beginning to understand. Inside the cottage, Alexandra changed quickly, trading garden-stained clothes for a simple blouse and slacks. The local newspaper lay open on her kitchen table, and her heart stopped at the headline, Kent Industries' acquisition of Stewart Manufacturing halted. CEO cites family emergency. The accompanying photo showed her father leaving their Manhattan offices looking stern. The article mentioned unnamed sources, suggesting the absent heiress's role in the delayed deal. Alexandra's hands shook as she folded the paper, hiding it under a stack of cooking magazines. The walk to the library took her past the hardware store. Through the window, she could see Jack helping a customer, his genuine smile a stark contrast to the practiced expressions she remembered from corporate negotiations. He caught her eye and waved, and something in her chest tightened. Last night at the diner, their hands had brushed while reaching for the sugar dispenser. The moment had lingered, electric and uncertain, before Emma's excited chatter about her. Upcoming book report had broken the spell. The library was quiet when she arrived, just a few regular patrons browsing the stacks. Mrs. Rodriguez looked up from her desk. Alexandra, perfect timing. Could you help Mr. Jenkins with the computer? He's trying to video chat with his grandchildren again. As she helped the elderly man navigate Skype, Alexandra caught a glimpse of her reflection in the computer screen. She looked different now. Softer somehow, less polished but more real. The designer clothes hung untouched in her closet, replaced by items from the local department store. Her hands bore calluses from gardening, and her skin had a healthy glow from actual time outdoors. "You remind me of someone," Mr. Jenkins said suddenly, squinting at her. "Was your picture in the paper recently?" Alexandra's heart raced. "I don't think so. I'm not very photogenic." The lie tasted bitter. "Let's get that camera angle adjusted for you." The afternoon passed in a blur of returned books and quiet conversations. At closing time, she heard familiar footsteps in the hall, Emma's skip and Jack's steady stride. They often walked her home on library evenings, a routine that had developed so naturally she couldn't remember when it started. "Alexandra!" Emma bounded in, waving a paper. "I got an A on my book report. And Mrs. Chen made dumplings again. She sent extra for you." Jack followed more slowly, carrying a paper bag that certainly contained said dumplings. Their eyes met, and Alexandra felt the now familiar warmth spread through her chest. He looked tired. She knew he'd been picking up extra shifts at the hardware store lately. "Congratulations on the A," she said to Emma, but her attention was split between the girl's excited chatter and the growing weight of her secrets. Every day, every genuine moment, every soft look from Jack made the truth harder to tell. As they walked home through Cedar Grove's twilight streets, Emma skipping ahead to examine interesting rocks and leaves, Jack's hand brushed against Alexandra's. And not by accident this time. Their fingers intertwined briefly, tentatively, before separating. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For making me feel real." He looked at her curiously, but Emma called out about finding a four-leaf clover, and the moment passed. Alexandra watched them both bend over the discovery, heads close together, and felt the walls of her two worlds pressing closer. The burner. Phone sat heavy in her pocket, a constant reminder that reality had a way of catching up, no matter how far you ran. But watching Jack and Emma, their simple joy in finding luck in ordinary places, Alexandra wondered if perhaps she'd been wrong about which reality mattered most. The Cedar Grove Harvest Festival banner sagged in the middle, and Alexandra found herself once again steadying a ladder while Jack made repairs. The town square buzzed with preparation, volunteers setting up booths, the scent of baking pies, drifting from the community center kitchen, and Emma darting between activities with boundless energy. "You know," Jack called down, securing the banner's corner, "my mom always said you can tell a lot about someone by how they handle a ladder." "Emergency," Alexandra laughed, remembering the corporate team-building exercises that were supposed to foster trust. None had felt as natural as this. "And what does my ladder-holding technique tell you? That you're stronger than you look." He descended, landing beside her with a gentle thud. Their shoulders touched briefly, neither moving away. "Emma's got her heart set on winning the pie contest this year. I heard. She's been practicing with Mrs. Chen all week, something about jazz music making the crust flakier." They watched as Emma helped Mrs. Rodriguez arrange pumpkins around the storytelling area. In the 2 months since the science fair, their lives had woven together in countless small ways. Sunday dinners at Mrs. Chen's, impromptu gardening sessions, quiet evenings in the library while Emma did her homework. "The festival committee asked if you'd help judge the preserves competition," Jack mentioned, coiling the extra rope. "Apparently your grandmother was the jam and jelly expert for 20 years running." Alexandra felt the familiar warmth that came whenever the town connected her to Margaret Kent, rather than the Kent Industries empire. "I'd love to, though I should warn you, my culinary expertise mostly involved knowing which restaurants took late dinner reservations. You managed those grilled cheese sandwiches last week just fine, after you showed me how to tell when the bread was perfectly toasted." Their eyes met, both remembering that evening in Alexandra's small kitchen. Emma had fallen asleep on the tea couch while they talked late into the night, Jack sharing stories about Sarah, Alexandra carefully editing tales from her past to hide the wealth and privilege. A crash from the community center interrupted the moment. "Dad," Emma called, "we need your magic fixing powers. The pie display wobbles worse than my science fair table." "Duty calls," Jack said with a smile. "Still on for the opening ceremony tonight?" Alexandra nodded, watching him jog toward the building. Her grandmother had loved this festival, she remembered. The cottage's photo albums were full of pictures. Margaret Kent, in her element, surrounded by community rather than corporate success. The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Alexandra found herself drawn into various tasks, helping Betty set up the diner's booth, sorting donated books for the library's sale, learning the intricate politics of preserve judging from Mrs. Peterson. Every interaction reinforced what she'd discovered about Cedar Grove. Here, wealth was measured in relationships rather than dollars. As dusk approached, the square transformed. String lights twinkled overhead. Music drifted from the makeshift stage, and the smell of hot cider and barbecue filled the air. Children ran between booths, faces painted like autumn leaves. Alexandra spotted Emma proudly arranging her pie among the contestants, Jack nearby pretending not to hover anxiously. "It's nice, isn't it?" Mrs. Chen appeared beside her, offering a paper cup of cider. "Seeing them happy." Alexandra accepted the drink, understanding the deeper meaning in the old woman's words. The entire town had watched Jack struggle as a single parent, had rallied around him and Emma in ways that made Alexandra's throat tight with emotion. "They deserve it." she said softly. "So do you, dear." Mrs. Chen patted her arm. "Margaret would be proud to see you here. She always said the Kent fortune had nothing on the riches of a small-town heart." Before Alexandra could respond to this uncomfortable proximity to truth, Emma bounded over. "It's starting! Come on, you have to see the lanterns." They joined the crowd gathering for the opening ceremony. Jack appeared beside them as the mayor began his speech about community and tradition. In the growing darkness, Alexandra felt Jack's fingers find hers, twining together as naturally as autumn leaves falling. Emma leaned against her other side, warm and trusting. "Look! They're letting the lanterns go." Paper lanterns rose into the night sky, carrying wishes and dreams. Alexandra watched them float away, these gentle lights ascending without corporate jets or golden parachutes. She thought of her father's definition of success, of board meetings and billion-dollar deals, and realized how far she'd drifted from that world without feeling like she was falling. "Make a wish," Emma whispered. Alexandra squeezed Jack's hand, felt Emma's head rest against her shoulder, and wished simply for more of this. More ordinary moments that felt extraordinary. More chances to be the person Cedar Grove believed her to be. The festival hummed. Around them, a celebration of small-town life that no longer felt small at all. Tomorrow would bring preserve judging and pie contests, Emma's excitement and Jack's quiet strength. For now, Alexandra stood between them, watching lanterns rise, like new possibilities into the autumn night, and felt truly, completely present, in a way no corporate success had ever managed to achieve. The envelope sat unopened on Jack's kitchen table, but he already knew what it contained. The school's logo in the corner and the weight of official letterhead told him everything he needed to know. He'd been dreading this moment since the start. Of the semester, Emma's gifted program fees were due. His daughter's voice drifted through the apartment window. She was outside with Alexandra, explaining the importance of proper mulching techniques to their newly planted autumn flowers. The sound of their laughter twisted something in his chest. Jack opened the envelope carefully, though there was nothing careful about the numbers inside. $3,000 for the enrichment program, another $1,000 for the required technology. Fee, all due within 2 weeks. The letter was sympathetic but firm. They'd already extended one deadline in recognition of Emma's exceptional performance and his circumstances. He spread his finances on the table like a general planning an impossible campaign. The hardware store had cut hours recently, big box competition at the edge of town. Pizza delivery was steady, but tips were down as winter approached. The school janitor position was reliable, but hadn't seen a raise in 3 years. The college fund Sarah had started for Emma was off limits. He'd promised her he'd keep that sacred. Their small emergency fund had been depleted by last month's car repairs. He was still paying off Emma's dental work from the summer. "Dad!" Emma burst through the door, cheeks flushed with autumn air. "Alexandra showed me how to tell when the soil is happy just by smelling it. Can we get some of those purple flowers for our window box too?" Jack quickly gathered the papers, but not before Alexandra, following Emma inside, caught sight of the school's logo. Her expression shifted subtly. She'd been a regular volunteer at the school, long enough to recognize official correspondence. "Hey, Sunshine," Jack managed a smile. "Purple flowers sound great. Why don't you draw up some plans for the window?" "Box, show me where everything should go?" Emma nodded eagerly, pulling out her ever-present sketchbook. Alexandra moved toward the kitchen, her casual offer to make tea, carrying the weight of unspoken understanding. They worked in comfortable silence. Emma drawing, Jack reviewing bills, Alexandra preparing tea with the familiarity of someone who'd made herself at home in their space. Outside, Cedar Grove was settling into evening, lights appearing in windows like stars coming out. "Dad?" Emma looked up from her drawing. "Can we get the supplies this weekend? The garden center has a sale." The question landed like a stone in still water. Jack felt Alexandra's attention sharpen, though she didn't turn from the kettle. "We might need to wait a bit, Sunshine. Maybe plan the design first, make sure we know exactly what we want." Emma's face fell slightly before brightening. That's smart. Alexandra always says good gardens need planning, like my science projects. Later, after Emma had gone to bed with promises of garden planning tomorrow, Alexandra lingered in the kitchen. Jack could feel the question forming in the air between them. "The gifted program," he said finally, answering before she could ask. "They've been patient, but—" He trailed off, unwilling to speak the full truth of his failure. Alexandra was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried an odd tension. "The school must have scholarship programs?" "Already tried. Too many budget cuts this year." Jack straightened the pile of bills, each motion precise. "I'll figure something out. Maybe pick up some extra shifts at the hardware store." Jack. Alexandra's hand touched his shoulder, and he had to resist the urge to lean into the comfort she offered. "Let me help. I have some savings." "I can't." The words came out sharper than intended. "We're not." The silence that followed held all their undefined moments, all the careful ways they'd been moving towards something neither had dared to name. "I care about Emma," Alexandra said softly. "And you, I know." Jack finally met her eyes. "That's why I can't." Alexandra withdrew her hand slowly, and Jack felt the loss like a physical thing. She gathered her coat, movements deliberately calm. At the door, she paused. "Sometimes accepting help isn't weakness," she said. "Sometimes it's just love." The door closed behind her with a gentle click. Jack sat in his kitchen, surrounded by papers that told him he wasn't enough, and thought about Alexandra's words, about love, about pride, about all the ways a person could be rich or poor. In her room, Emma's jazz music played softly to her window box plants. Jack remembered Sarah's voice. "Our daughter will have every chance we can give her." He looked at the school letter again, the numbers unchanging in their finality. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard the whisper of all the things Alexandra wasn't telling him, all the mysteries that surrounded her arrival in Cedar Grove. But louder than that was Emma's laughter, the sound of his daughter blooming under the attention of two people who loved her in different but equally fierce ways. The tea Alexandra had made was still warm. Jack drank it slowly, tasting all the complicated flavors of pride and need, of independence and connection, of the choice between keeping walls up and letting love in. Alexandra sat in her grandmother's study, surrounded by old photographs and financial documents. The community fund letterhead stared back at her. Cedar Grove Educational Support Initiative. Margaret Kent had been its founder 30 years ago, though few current residents connected that fact to Alexandra's presence in town. Her grandmother's diary lay open beside her, entries spanning decades of quiet philanthropy. Margaret had understood something Alexandra was only now beginning to grasp: how to help people while preserving their dignity. The burner phone buzzed. Another message from Charles. "Father's patience wearing thin. The Stewart manufacturing deal is falling apart. Come home." Home. Alexandra looked around the study, at the wall where Emma's garden drawings now hung alongside her grandmother's pressed flowers. When had Cedar Grove become more home than Manhattan? The community fund's application process was simple, designed to help without humiliating. Alexandra had spent the morning creating a paper trail that would make the grant to Emma appear both logical and legitimate. Mrs. Rodriguez had unknowingly helped, her glowing reports of Emma's academic performance providing perfect justification for emergency educational support. "It's not lying," Alexandra told her grandmother's photograph. "It's just redistributing blessings." The Margaret in the photo seemed to smile knowingly, as if she'd done similar mathematical gymnastics in her time. The walk to the community center took her past the hardware store. Jack was working later now, the circles under his eyes darker each day. He didn't see her pass, focused on helping a customer, but Alexandra paused to watch him. Even exhausted, he carried himself with a quiet grace that made her chest ache. Betty caught her staring through the window. "That man works too hard," the waitress said, pausing with her grocery bags. "Proud as they come, though, like his father was." Tell me about his father? Alexandra fell into step beside her. Every piece of Jack's history felt precious. Town, handyman, raised Jack alone after his mama passed, taught him everything about fixing things, except maybe how to fix his own tendency to carry the world on his shoulders. Betty shook her head fondly. The Morrisons have been helping this town run smooth for 3 generations, never asking a thing in return. The community centre was quiet this morning. Alexandra found Carol, the fund's administrator, organising grant applications. Alexandra, here to help sort applications? Carol brightened at her appearance. Since the Harvest Festival, Alexandra had been volunteering with various community organisations, learning the town's support systems from the inside. Actually, Alexandra placed the envelope on Carol's desk. I have one to add. For the emergency. Educational grant. Carol's eyes softened as she read. Emma Morrison. That man would work himself to bones before asking for help. She looked up sharply. Did Jack apply? Not exactly, but the need is documented, and Emma's qualifications are exceptional. Alexandra kept her voice steady. Everything's in order? Carol studied the application, then Alexandra's face. Margaret Kent used to do things like this, find ways to help that let people keep their pride. She smiled slightly. You remind me of her sometimes. Alexandra's heart stuttered. I've been reading about the fund's history, she said carefully. She was quite remarkable. She understood that sometimes love means finding bridges between pride and need. Carol stamped the application. The committee meets Thursday. I'll make sure this gets proper attention. Outside, autumn wind stirred fallen leaves along the sidewalk. Alexandra walked slowly, letting her feet carry her toward the library. Emma would be there after school, working on homework while waiting for Jack's hardware store shift to end. The pieces were in motion. The grant would appear as a natural result of Emma's academic excellence. Jack would still have to accept it, but facing a committee's recognition of his daughter's merit might be easier than facing charity from whatever she was to him. Emma's voice carried from the library's children's section, and then the rabbit. Realized that sometimes magic isn't about big spells, but about small kindnesses that change everything. Alexandra paused in the doorway, watching Emma read to younger children during story time. Her animated gestures, her careful way of showing each picture to her audience, her pure joy in sharing stories, all of it so precious, so worth protecting. She's a natural teacher. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared beside Alexandra. Like her mother was, Sarah would be so proud. Tell me about Sarah. The question slipped out before Alexandra could stop it. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes grew distant with memory. She believed every child deserved a chance to love learning. Started our first science club here. She focused on Alexandra. You know, she met Jack right there, in that corner. He was fixing a broken shelf, and she was so impressed by how he explained the physics of it to her students. Love bloomed in ordinary moments, Alexandra realized. In broken shelves and story times, in shared dreams and quiet support, in finding ways to help that honored both the giving and receiving. The burner phone weighed heavy in her pocket, reminding her of other obligations, other dreams she'd once thought mattered. But watching Emma share her love of stories, knowing Jack would arrive soon with tired eyes and a proud smile, Alexandra knew she'd never felt richer than in these small moments of real connection. Now she just had to find a way to help them both believe that love was worth more than pride. The evening air carried the first real bite of winter as Alexandra and Jack walked home from Emma's school concert. Emma had gone ahead with Mrs. Chen, excited about promised hot chocolate and cookie decorating, leaving them alone in the gentle snow that had begun to fall. She was amazing, Alexandra said, thinking of Emma's confident solo in the school choir's rendition of Winter Wonderland. Sarah loved music too. Jack's voice was soft, remembering. She used to sing Emma to sleep. Every night. He paused, then added, I haven't talked about her much lately. Does that bother you? Jack considered this as they walked, snowflakes catching in his dark hair. No, he said finally. It feels right. like she'd want us to be finding joy again. The word us hung in the air between them. They'd stopped walking, standing beneath the glow of a street lamp. Snow swirled in the light, making everything feel somehow both magical and deeply real. "Jack," Alexandra began, her heart pounding. All her corporate training, all her practiced poise, meant nothing in this moment of pure truth. "I need to tell you something." But Jack had turned to face her, and the expression in his eyes made the words die in her throat. He reached up slowly, brushing snowflakes from her hair with a gentleness that made her chest ache. "I know there are things you're not telling me," he said quietly. "I see it sometimes when you think no one's watching, like you're carrying something heavy." Alexandra's breath caught. But I also see who you are here now. With Emma. With the town. With me." His hand moved to cup her cheek, warm against the cold air. "And that feels real." The last of her carefully constructed walls crumbled. Alexandra leaned into his touch, letting herself be simply present in this moment. The snow fell silently around them, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour. "It is real," she whispered. "This is the most real I've ever been." The kiss, when it came, felt inevitable as gravity. Jack's lips were warm despite the cold, and his arms around her were both gentle and sure. Alexandra melted into him, tasting snowflakes and truth and possibility. They parted slowly, foreheads touching. Jack's smile held a touch of wonder. "Mrs. Chen will be wondering where we are. Emma will have eaten all the cookies," Alexandra agreed, but neither of them moved. "Let her," Jack said softly and kissed her again. Later they would join Emma and Mrs. Chen, their cold hands warming around mugs of hot chocolate, their slightly rumpled appearance drawing knowing smiles from the old woman. Emma would chat excitedly about her performance, but her eyes would keep darting between them, noting their closer proximity, the way their hands found each other under the table. But for now, they stood in the falling snow, holding each other, both aware that something had shifted irrevocably. Alexandra knew her secret still lay between them, knew that truth would have to come soon, but in this moment, with snowflakes in her hair and Jack's heart beating steady against hers, she let herself believe that love might be stronger than fear, that truth told with love might be received with understanding. Jack's fingers laced with hers as they finally turned toward Mrs. Chen's apartment. "Ready?" Alexandra squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of honest work and constant care. "Yes," she said, and meant it in ways that encompassed far more than their walk through the snow. The magazine arrived at Cedar Grove's public library on a Tuesday morning, shuffled between professional journals and the weekly newspapers. Mrs. Rodriguez almost missed it, until Emma's excited voice carried across the quiet space. "Look, it's Alexandra, but her hair looks different." Jack glanced up from the shelf he was repairing, just in time to see Mrs. Rodriguez quickly slide the business magazine under her desk. But Emma was faster, already pulling it out with childish enthusiasm. Kent Industries dynasty, the mysterious disappearance of America's most powerful heiress. Emma read slowly, her finger tracing the words beneath a glossy photo of Alexandra. In corporate attire, hair elegantly styled, standing beside a distinguished older man. "Dad, why does Alexandra look so fancy? And why does it say her name is Alexandra Kent?" The screwdriver slipped from Jack's hand, clattering against the floor. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent library like a gunshot. Mrs. Rodriguez moved quickly, trying to distract Emma. "Sweetheart, why don't we go check on your science club project?" But Emma's world had already narrowed to the magazine in her hands, to the photograph that showed a version of Alexandra that seemed simultaneously familiar and completely foreign. "It says she's worth billions of dollars. Dad, is this why she's been helping with the community fund?" Jack stood slowly, his world tilting on its axis. Every unexplained detail, every careful omission in Alexandra's stories, every moment she'd held back, it all crystallized into a truth he should have seen. The library door chimed. Alexandra walked in, carrying her usual stack of returns. She froze at the tableau before her, Emma clutching the magazine, Mrs. Rodriguez's apologetic expression, and Jack's face, a study in dawning comprehension. "I can explain," she started, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Emma," Jack's voice was carefully controlled, "please go with Mrs. Rodriguez." "But Dad, now, sunshine." Emma reluctantly let Mrs. Rodriguez lead her away, looking back over her shoulder at the two people she'd grown to trust, now standing like strangers in the morning light. Jack picked up the magazine, studying the photo. "How much of it was real?" he asked quietly. "Everything that matters." Alexandra took a step forward, stopping when Jack flinched almost imperceptibly. "Everything with you and Emma, that's the most real thing in my life. The community fund grant for Emma's program, that was you. It's legitimate. Every qualification, every requirement, Emma earned it. I just made sure it was seen. Like you made sure the hardware store got that big supply contract last month? Like you mysteriously knew about the school's plan to cut the science club funding before anyone else." Each question landed like a physical blow. Alexandra watched as Jack pieced together 3 months of careful interventions, of help offered, through channels that wouldn't wound his pride. "I wanted to tell you," she whispered. "When?" Jack's voice cracked slightly. "After you'd fixed all our problems with your billions? After you'd decided we were charity cases worth saving? That's... My daughter loves you," he interrupted, the words carrying the weight of both accusation and plea. "She draws pictures of our future garden, plans science experiments to show you, talks about you like you're—" He stopped, running a hand over his face. "Do you know what it's going to do to her when you leave? When your real life calls you back to your empire?" "This is my real life." Alexandra stepped forward again, reaching for him. "Jack, please, what I found here, with you and Emma, it's everything I never knew I needed." But Jack was already backing away, the magazine still clutched in his hand. "I need time," he said, "to think, to process this. Jack, just give me time." He walked out of the library, leaving Alexandra standing among the books that had been part of her cover story, part of the simple life she'd built. Through the window, she could see Emma in the children's section, clearly arguing with Mrs. Rodriguez about staying behind. The magazine lay abandoned on a table, Alexandra's other self staring up at her with practiced confidence. In the photo, she stood beside her father at a charity gala, both of them wearing expressions that revealed nothing, felt nothing, risked nothing. Now, watching Jack's retreating figure through the window, Alexandra realized that the real risk had never been in leaving that world behind. The real risk lay in loving people enough to let them decide if your truth was worth forgiveness. 3 days of silence felt like an eternity. Alexandra paced her grandmother's cottage, watching snow gather on the dormant garden where Emma's beloved jazz-loving plants lay waiting for spring. The business magazine had spawned dozens of local news alerts, each one spreading the story further. Kent Harris found in small town. Billionaire's daughter living simple life. Corporate princess in hidden romance. The knock, when it finally came, was firm and familiar. Alexandra's hands shook as she opened the door to find Jack standing there, snow dusting his shoulders, holding her wallet. The real one, with her Kent Industries ID and platinum cards, which she'd kept hidden in her apartment. "Emma found this," he said quietly. "Under the sink when she was helping Mrs. Chen clean your apartment. She thought it was lost and wanted to surprise you by finding it." Alexandra's heart sank. "Is she?" "She's with Mrs. Rodriguez. We need to talk." She stepped back, letting him enter the cottage. Jack looked around, seeing it with new eyes, the antique furniture, the valuable paintings, the subtle signs of wealth she'd tried to downplay. "I found these too." He placed a stack of papers on the kitchen table. Community fund documents, hardware store contracts, school budget meetings. "You've been orchestrating everything, haven't you? Like some kind of fairy godmother with a corporate checkbook." "I wanted to help without..." "Without what?" without letting the poor handyman know he was dating a billionaire, without admitting you could solve every problem we have with your pocket change. The bitterness in his voice made her flinch. That's not fair. What I feel for you, for Emma, it has nothing to do with money, doesn't it? Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. You walked into our lives playing a part, simple Alexandra, finding herself in a small town, but you were watching us struggle, knowing you could fix everything with a single phone call. I was trying to protect your pride. My pride? Jackie laughed, a harsh sound. My pride isn't worth lying to my daughter. Do you know what she asked me yesterday? If you were pretending to love us as some kind of social experiment, if we were just your small-town adventure before you go back to your real life. The words hit Alexandra like physical blows. Emma thinks that? She's 8, and she just found out that someone she trusts has been lying to her. Jack's voice softened slightly. She's trying to make sense of it the only way she can. Alexandra sank into her grandmother's chair, the weight of consequences pressing down on her. I never meant to hurt her, or you. When I came here, I was running from a life that felt completely empty, and then I met you both, and everything changed. I found something real. Real. Jack picked up her wallet, opened it to display her Kent Industries ID. This is real. Alexandra Kent, heir to a fortune built on corporate takeovers and strategic acquisitions. The woman who was supposed to dismantle Stewart Manufacturing and fire hundreds of workers. That's who you really are. No, Alexandra stood, sudden anger, giving her strength. That's who I was supposed to be. But this town, you, Emma, you showed me who I could be instead. Someone who helps because she cares, not because it's a tax write-off. Someone who loves garden vegetables grown to jazz music and science projects about bean sprouts and quiet moments in a small-town library. She moved closer to him, close enough to see the conflict in his eyes. I should have told you the truth sooner. I was afraid of losing this, losing you. But everything I felt, everything we shared, that was real. More real than anything in my old life. Jack didn't step away, but she could feel the careful distance he maintained. How can I believe that? How can I trust anything when it's all been built on lies? Because you know me, Alexandra whispered. Not Alexandra Kent, the heiress. Just Alexandra, who burns grilled cheese and needs help staking tomato plants and falls in love with a man who teaches his daughter that kindness matters more than success. The word love hung between them, its first utterance both a declaration and a plea. Jack closed his eyes briefly, and Alexandra could see him wrestling with everything. Pride, trust, love, betrayal. Emma wants to see you, he said finally. She has questions, a lot of them, and she deserves honest answers. Yes, Alexandra agreed immediately. Anything she wants to know. I'll bring her by tomorrow. Jack moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I understand why you did it, why you ran, why you hid the truth. But understanding isn't the same as trusting. I know. Alexandra watched him reach for the door handle. Jack, thank you for letting me explain to Emma. He nodded once, not quite meeting her eyes. She believes in second chances. Her mother taught her that. The door closed behind him with a quiet click, leaving Alexandra alone in her grandmother's cottage. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering Cedar Grove in a blank white sheet that promised the possibility of fresh starts. The text messages accumulated on Alexandra's phone like fallen leaves. Can't make it today. Emma's not feeling well. Maybe next week would be better. Sorry, we have other plans. Each one perfectly polite, perfectly distant, perfectly. Breaking her heart. Cedar Grove had changed overnight. Whispers followed her at the grocery store. Betty's welcoming smile at the diner held a hint of uncertainty. Even Mrs. Chen's usual warmth seemed tempered by confusion. The simple life she'd built was fracturing along fault lines of wealth and class that she'd tried so hard to ignore. She kept her routine, clinging to the fragments of the life she'd come to love. The library shifts felt longest, watching, Emma's empty chair in the children's section, seeing Jack's repairs around the building, everything a reminder of what she'd lost. "He's protecting his heart," Mrs. Rodriguez said one quiet afternoon, finding Alexandra staring at Emma's science fair photo on the bulletin board. "And hers." "I know," Alexandra touched the photo gently. "I would too, in his place. But I miss them. Both of them. All of it." She gestured vaguely at the library, the town beyond its windows. "I miss being just Alexandra." The older woman's eyes softened. "You were never just anything, dear. That was part of the problem." At home, Alexandra's grandmother's diary provided little comfort. The pages were filled with wisdom about building community, about using privilege to lift others up, but nothing about how to mend a heart broken by good intentions. The garden lay dormant under snow, Emma's careful labels still marking where. Spring would bring new growth, if it brought new growth, if she was still here to see it. Her father's messages grew more insistent. "The board requires resolution. Your responsibilities await. This experiment has gone on long enough." But it wasn't an experiment. That was what no one in her old life could understand. The Alexandra who had arrived in Cedar Grove no longer existed. The Alexandra who had fallen in love with a small town with quiet moments, with a man who fixed broken things and a little girl who played jazz to plants. She was the real one. The sound of children playing drew her to the window one afternoon. Emma was there with her friends, having a snowball fight in the park across from the cottage. Alexandra watched, heart aching, as Emma's laughter carried through the glass. Then Emma looked up, caught her watching. For a moment neither moved. Then Emma raised her hand in a small wave, tentative but real. Alexandra waved back, tears blurring her vision. Her phone buzzed, Jack's name appearing for the first time in days. "Emma wants to know if the plants still need jazz in winter." Alexandra's hands shook as she typed. "Plants always need music, even when they're sleeping." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "She misses the garden. The garden misses her." Another long pause. "We can't just pretend nothing changed." "I know, but can we try to build something new, something honest this time?" The response took so long that Alexandra thought he wouldn't answer. When it came, it carried the weight of careful consideration. "I don't know." She watched Emma play in the snow, remembering all their shared moments. Science projects and bedtime stories, garden planning and quiet confidences. How could she explain that her deception had grown from love, not calculation? That every lie had hurt her too, had felt like a betrayal of the truth they were building together. "I understand," she texted back, "but I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you decide, whatever happens, Cedar Grove is home now. The real me. The whole truth belongs here." No response came, but across the street, Emma waved again before running off with her friends. It wasn't forgiveness, wasn't even acceptance, but it was something. A crack in the wall of silence, a seed of possibility waiting beneath the snow. Alexandra turned away from the window, toward the pile of papers on her grandmother's desk. Legal. Documents, bank statements, everything she needed to make her situation permanent. Not as the hidden heiress or the corporate princess in exile, but as Margaret Kent's granddaughter, carrying on a legacy of quiet community support and genuine connection. If Jack and Emma never fully let her back into their lives, she would learn to live with that, but she wouldn't run away again. Some things, once found, were worth fighting for, even if the fight meant simply staying, simply proving day by day that love could be stronger than pride, that truth could heal what lies had broken. Outside, snow continued to fall on Cedar Grove, covering old tracks, making space for new paths to be formed when spring finally came. The Kent family's private jet landing at Cedar Grove's small regional airport was like a shark swimming into a pond of goldfish. Alexandra heard about it from Betty first. The diner's morning regulars had watched it descend, sleek and predatory, bringing her old world crashing into her new one. "Your father and brother are at the mayor's office," Betty said, pouring coffee Alexandra hadn't ordered. talking about economic development opportunities. Her tone made the words sound like a diagnosis. Alexandra's hands clenched under the counter. Of course they'd come like this, not to find her, but to acquire her like any other asset that had wandered off the balance sheet. Through the diner's window she saw Jack walking Emma to school. They were running late today. Emma's backpack was half unzipped, papers threatening to escape. Alexandra fought the urge to run out, to help, to warn them. The bell above the diner's door chimed. "Hello, sister dear." Charles Kent stood in the doorway, immaculate in a suit that cost more than most Cedar Grove residents made in a month. Behind him, their father waited by a black town car, phone to his ear, already reorganizing the world to his liking. The prodigal daughter playing small-town citizen. Charles slid onto the stool beside her. "Though I hear you've been more than playing." "A handyman, Alexa." "Really?" The childhood nickname hit like a slap. Alexandra straightened, drawing on years of boardroom battles. "His name is Jack. And whatever you're planning, Charles, don't." Her brother's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Planning? We're here to help. Father's already arranged everything. The hardware store's parent company is eager to sell. We'll modernize it, expand it. Your handyman could manage it, a significant step up from changing light bulbs, wouldn't you say?" Horror crawled up Alexandra's spine. They'd found her weak spot and planned to exploit it, just as they'd taught her to do in business. "Jack won't accept that." "Everyone accepts the right offer, sister. You taught me that, remember?" "Stewart Manufacturing." Alexandra stood, her coffee untouched. Through the window, she could see her father ending his call, straightening his tie with the gesture that always preceded closing a deal. "This isn't a corporate takeover, Charles. These are real people. This is my home." "Home?" Charles laughed. "This is a tantrum, Alexa, an extended holiday from responsibility. It's time to come back to reality." Reality. As if the past months of genuine connection, of love given and received freely, were somehow less real than spreadsheets and profit margins. "Tell father I'll meet him at grandmother's cottage in an hour," Alexandra said, already moving toward the door. "And Charles, if you go near Jack or Emma, if you try to manipulate their lives, I'll give every share I own to the Stewart Manufacturing Employees Union." She left him sputtering, hurrying toward the school. She had to warn Jack, had to make him understand that whatever her family offered would come with strings that could strangle everything good in Cedar Grove. But the schoolyard was empty now, the morning bell already rung. Through the window, she could see Emma in her classroom, head bent over her work. Jack would be in the basement, checking the heating system that had been troublesome all winter. A text would have to do, "My family's in town. Please don't talk to them. Don't accept anything they offer. I'll explain everything." His response came quickly. "Already met your father. Town council meeting in an hour." Alexandra's heart stopped. Then she was running, her impractical shoes clicking on sidewalks that had taken her from corporate princess to someone real, someone worthy of love. She had an hour to save her home from the very lessons she'd spent a lifetime learning to implement. Behind her, her father's town car pulled away from the diner, heading towards City Hall. The game was on, and Alexandra finally understood what her grandmother had been trying to teach her all along. Sometimes the most important business decisions had nothing to do with business at all. The town council chamber was packed. Alexandra slipped in just as her father was beginning his presentation, taking a seat at the back. She could see Jack in the front row, his expression carefully neutral as Richard Kent outlined his vision. For Cedar Grove's economic revitalization, the hardware store is just the beginning, her father was saying, his commanding presence filling the small room. Kent Industries sees tremendous potential in Cedar Grove. We're prepared to invest significantly in modernizing the downtown area, bringing in new businesses, creating opportunities. Alexandra watched the council members' faces, saw the mixture of hope and wariness she remembered from countless corporate acquisitions. Her father had always been good at making the dissolution of communities sound like progress. "Of course, we'll need local talent to manage these developments," Richard continued. his gaze falling deliberately on Jack. People who understand. The community who have proven their worth through years of dedicated service. Jack's shoulders stiffened slightly. Alexandra could almost hear his thoughts, could see him weighing opportunity against integrity. She thought of Emma's school fees, of his endless extra shifts, of all the ways poverty could wear down even the strongest principles. "I have some questions," Jack's voice cut through her thoughts. He stood, and Alexandra's heart squeezed at the quiet dignity in his bearing. "About Stewart Manufacturing." The room went silent. Richard Kent's practiced smile flickered briefly. "That situation is still under review," Charles interjected smoothly from beside their father. "But we're here to talk about Cedar Grove's future." "Stewart Manufacturing was a family business in a small town like this one," Jack continued, as if Charles hadn't spoken. "They had a hardware store, too, and a community that depended on them, until Kent Industries decided they were worth more broken apart than whole." Alexandra stood before she could stop herself. All eyes turned to her, including her father's. Sharp gaze. "He's right," she said, her voice carrying in the stunned silence. "And that's exactly what will happen here. I should know. I wrote the original strategy for dismantling community businesses like these. Make them an offer they can't refuse. Promise opportunities, then strip them down to assets and profit margins." "Alexandra," her father's voice held a warning. "You're emotionally compromised." "No, father. For the first time in my life, I'm seeing clearly." She moved to the front of the room, taking her place beside Jack. "Cedar Grove isn't an investment opportunity. It's a home. These aren't assets to be managed. They're people who manage to keep hope and kindness alive in a world that tries to price everything." "This is precisely why we were concerned about your extended absence," Charles said. "You've lost perspective." "Have I?" Alexandra turned to face the council. "Ask them about their plans for the elementary school, about what happens to local suppliers when their efficiency metrics kick in, about how many family businesses in Stewart Manufacturing's town are still open." She felt Jack's presence beside her, solid and real. "I came here running from who I was supposed to be, but Cedar Grove, these people, they showed me who I could be instead. Someone who measures worth in more than dollars. Someone who understands that some things aren't for sale. Everything has a price," her father said quietly. "No," Jack spoke up. "It doesn't. My father taught me that. This town taught me that. And somewhere along the way, your daughter learned it too." The council chamber erupted in murmurs. Alexandra watched her father's face as he realized he was losing control of the narrative. Charles was already on his phone, probably calling. "In corporate reinforcements. I'm withdrawing from Kent Industries," Alexandra announced. "My shares, my position, my inheritance, I'm signing it all over to the Stewart Manufacturing Employees Fund. Let them rebuild what our family tried to destroy." "You can't be serious," Charles sputtered. "Watch me." She turned to Jack, finding strength in his steady gaze. "I choose this, not as Alexandra Kent, but as the person I've become here. The person who loves garden vegetables and jazz music and small-town librarians who remember everyone's favorite books. The person who finally understands what real wealth looks like." Jack's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Behind them, Betty's voice rang out. "Well, I say we put it to a vote. Who here wants Cedar Grove to stay Cedar Grove?" Hands rose across the chamber. Alexandra watched her father's face as he saw his carefully laid plans crumble in the face of something he'd never fully understood, the strength of a community that valued people over profits. "This isn't over," Charles warned. "Yes," Alexandra smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in her life. "It is. Cedar Grove isn't for sale, and neither am I." The Kent family's private jet departed Cedar Grove the same way it had arrived, like an alien object that had briefly invaded a different world. Alexandra watched it disappear into the winter sky from her grandmother's garden, where Emma was, carefully checking on their dormant plants. "Do you think the jazz helped them stay warm?" Emma asked, gently touching a snow-covered marker. "Through the winter?" "I'm sure it did," Alexandra answered, her voice thick with emotion. It was the first time Emma had spoken directly to her since the truth had come out. Plants know when people love them. Like people know. Emma looked up at her, eyes serious. Even when there are secrets? Alexandra knelt in the snow beside her. Emma, I'm so sorry I wasn't honest with you. You deserved the truth from the beginning. Dad says sometimes people hide things because they're scared, not because they're bad. Emma's mittened hand found Alexandra's. Were you scared? Terrified, Alexandra admitted. Scared of being just my family's money, scared of losing the real connections I found here, scared of losing you and your dad. But you chose us, Emma said, over everything. I heard you in the meeting. You chose being real instead of being rich. The simple wisdom of children, Alexandra thought, could cut through any amount of adult complexity. Yes, because real love is worth more than any amount of money. That's what Mom always said. Emma's voice was quiet. That real love builds things up instead of breaking them down. From the garden gate came the sound of footsteps crunching on snow. Jack stood there, carrying 3 cups of what smelled like hot chocolate from Betty's diner. Thought you two might need warming up, he said, his voice carrying a warmth that had been missing these past weeks. Garden planning is serious business in winter. Emma bounced up to take her cup, leaving Alexandra and Jack to share a look heavy with unspoken words. Since the town council meeting 2 days ago, they'd been navigating a new territory. Not quite the easy closeness they'd had before, but not the painful distance of recent weeks either. The Stewart manufacturing papers are signed, Alexandra said, accepting her cup. Everything's been transferred. I'm officially just Margaret Kent's granddaughter now, with a small inheritance and a lot of garden space. Jack nodded slowly. Betty told me your brother came by the diner before they left. Said something about you throwing away your future. He never understood that I'm not throwing it away. I'm choosing it. Alexandra watched Emma drawing patterns in the snow with a stick. A future with real connections, real purpose. A future where love matters more than leveraged buyouts. It won't be easy, Jack said softly, living simply after having everything. I never had everything. Alexandra met his eyes. Not until I had nothing except what really mattered. Emma's voice carried across the garden. Dad! Alexandra! Look, what I found! She held up a small green shoot poking through the snow near the garden wall. Life! It's growing even in winter! They moved together to examine her discovery. Jack's hand found Alexandra's as they knelt beside Emma. And this. Time neither pulled away. Mrs. Rodriguez says there's going to be a spring carnival, Emma continued excitedly, to raise money for the school science program. Can we all help? I want to do a booth about plants and music and hope. Hope? Alexandra asked. Yeah, about how things can grow, even when it seems too cold or hard, like love does. Jack's hand tightened on Alexandra's. Above them, the winter sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the snow-covered garden where, against all odds, new life was pushing through. Speaking of the science program, Jack said carefully, the community fund grant came through, the full amount. Alexandra held her breath, but Jack wasn't finished. Thank you, he said, not for the money, for believing in Emma's potential, enough to make sure others saw it too, for loving us enough to risk everything. Even when I did it wrong? Alexandra asked. Especially then, Jack smiled, because that's when it was clearest that your heart was in the right place, even if your methods needed work. Emma threw her arms around both of them, nearly spilling their hot chocolate. Can we make the garden bigger in spring? Mrs. Chen says she has seeds from her family in China, and I've been reading about companion planting, and as Emma's plans spilled out, Alexandra leaned into the embrace of her chosen family. Around them, Cedar Grove went about its daily life. Betty's diner sign flipping to lunch specials, the library cart being wheeled out with Mrs. Rodriguez's daily book display, Mr. Jenkins walking his dog past the garden gate with a knowing smile. This, Alexandra thought, was true wealth. The richness of belonging, the abundance of love given and received freely, the prosperity of a life measured in moments rather than millions. Spring came to Cedar Grove like a long-held breath finally released. Alexandra stood in her grandmother's garden, now her garden, officially, after signing the last of the transfer papers, watching Emma demonstrate her latest scientific discovery to a group of eager third graders. "See?" Emma adjusted the small speaker playing Miles Davis. "The plants growing near the jazz grow differently than the ones near classical music. We're measuring the difference every day and graphing it." The science club had overflowed her grandmother's garden, spreading into neat experimental plots, where students tested various theories about music and plant growth. Mrs. Rodriguez called it the living laboratory. Emma called it paradise. Jack appeared beside Alexandra, his hand finding its familiar place at the small of her back. "The hardware store's morning shift is covered," he said. "I can stay for the whole presentation." Since declining the Kent Industries offer, the hardware store had seen an unexpected boom in business. The town's response to the attempted corporate takeover had been to support their local businesses with fierce loyalty. Jack had hired 2 part-time workers to help manage the increased traffic, giving him more time with his family. Family. The word still felt new and precious to Alexandra. Not the cold corporate dynasty of her past, but this warm, growing thing built on love and trust and second chances. "Ms. Alexandra?" One of Emma's classmates raised her hand. "Is it true you used to be a billionaire?" Before Alexandra could answer, Emma stepped in with the confidence of someone who knew the real story. "She still is rich," Emma said, "just not with money. She's rich with love and gardens and knowing how to fix grilled cheese sandwiches just right." A ripple of laughter went through the assembled parents and teachers. Alexandra felt Jack's quiet chuckle beside her. "And don't forget," Emma continued seriously, "she's rich with jazz-loving plants and science experiments and having the best dad in the world to share it all with." Alexandra's heart swelled. The ring in her pocket, a simple band Jack had given her last night as they sat in their favorite booth at Betty's Diner, seemed to pulse with warmth. The children dispersed to their various experimental plots, Emma leading them like a tiny professor. Alexandra watched as her soon-to-be stepdaughter explained companion planting and the importance of talking kindly to growing things. "She's so much like Sarah," Jack said softly, "but also her own person. Sarah would have loved seeing her like this. She would have loved seeing you like this too." Alexandra squeezed his hand. Happy, at peace. The garden had become a symbol of their journey, the careful tending, the patient growth, the faith that something beautiful would emerge from humble beginnings. What had started as Alexandra's hiding place had transformed into a community gathering spot, a place of learning and connection. Mrs. Chen appeared with her famous dumplings, setting up a small table near the garden entrance. Betty followed, with thermoses of coffee and hot chocolate. The spring carnival was next week, but these impromptu garden gatherings had become a regular occurrence in Cedar Grove. "Did you see the news?" Mrs. Rodriguez joined them, tablet in hand. "Stewart Manufacturing is reopening under employee ownership. They're restoring the hardware store there too." Alexandra smiled, thinking of the corporate shares she'd signed away. Her father still wasn't speaking to her, and Charles sent periodic texts about her irrational choices, but she'd never felt more certain of any decision. "Sometimes," she said, watching Emma demonstrate the proper way to measure plant growth to her attentive audience, "the best business decision is choosing not to treat everything like business." Jack's arm tightened around her waist. "Speaking of decisions," he whispered, "have you thought about when to tell her?" Alexandra touched the ring in her pocket. "Maybe during the carnival. She's been so excited about her science booth." "Dad!" "Alexandra!" Emma's call interrupted them. "Come, quick, I think the jazz beans are dancing." They joined the circle of laughing children watching plants sway in the spring breeze, their shadows dancing on soil that had once seemed dormant but now burst with life. Alexandra looked around at these people who had become her true fortune. Jack's steady presence beside her, Emma's boundless enthusiasm, the community that had taught her the real meaning of wealth. "Before we continue," she said to the assembled group, "tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow we're planting something extra special." Emma's face lit up with understanding. "Is it time for the big surprise, the one that means we'll all be together forever?" Jack laughed. "Nothing gets past you, does it, sunshine?" "Nope," Emma beamed. "Just like Mom always said, love grows best when you pay attention to all the little details." In the garden her grandmother had loved, surrounded by the future she had chosen, Alexandra felt the last pieces of her old life fall away. Here, among the jazz-loving beans and science experiments, between the hardware store and the library, in the heart of a small town that had taught her the true meaning of worth, she was finally completely home. The ring in her pocket wasn't just a promise to Jack and Emma, it was a promise to herself, to Cedar Grove, to the person she had become.